tilt it in your direction.
My question is on extraterrestrials. It's a topic that has interested me for a long time.
Come closer to the microphone, please. Yes.
I wanted to ask you if there is life on other planets, and if Allah has indicated in the Quran if there is life, and if mankind will settle on other planets besides Earth.
Right. On this issue I have spoken, I think, for scores of time. Wherever I visit, this is one of the questions which quite often is raised, and I have answered it many times, but perhaps USA is cut off from the rest of the world, and that is an unfortunate situation which we are trying to redress with the introduction of MTA 3 hour daily programs. So I hope you will be interested in having a small antenna dish and installed in your respective homes, so that when you finish your day, return home, instead of sitting before the other television, which most often than not is obnoxious to spiritual taste, you would be able to watch Muslim television Ahmadiyya, which will connect you with the rest of the world. Repeatedly, question-answer sessions will be reproduced there, which are held in different countries of the world, East and West, and you will be in touch with what's going on in the world of Ahmadiyyat. What are the questions which are agitating people everywhere, right? So that is a real answer. But the news of those answers have not yet reached here, so I will pick up the subject again, okay? No, you can keep waiting here, you just until your question is answered, right? The Holy Quran is the only book in the entire world of divine books, that is divine scriptures, which mentions life beyond earth, of a type which is found here on earth, entitled biological life, life with locomotor system, etc., etc. Now that is mentioned in one of the verses of the Quran, which reads, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ خَلْقُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَمَا بَثَّ فِيهِمَا مِنْ دَابَّةٍ وَهُوَ عَلَى جَمْعِهِمْ إِذَا يَشَاءُ قَدِيرٌ. The first part deals with the creation of heavens and the earth, saying, from among his signs is this, that he has created the heavens and the earth. وَمَا بَثَّ فِيهِمَا مِنْ دَابَّةٍ, and that he has spread in both of them, the heavens and the earth, dabba. The word dabba means biological life. Ba means life, but by biological life I mean, let me say, I think zoological life would be better. Not botanical, that also may be there, but here the Holy Quran is speaking of zoological life. All animals which move through some locomotor system on earth are called dabba in Arabic, and the word dabba does not apply to spiritual life. The word dabba does not apply to the so-called ghostly lives. It does not apply to angelic life. So it's a very specific word which applies only to the species of life we know here on earth. Now it's a fascinating thing that the Holy Quran, more than 1400 years ago, declared that it is from among the signs of Allah that He created the heaven and the earth and spread life in both of them. Now the question remains, if there is life, will it be possible for us to communicate with each other? The answer to that is yes. The Holy Quran says, وَهُوَ عَلَى جَمْعِهِمْ إِذَا يَشَاءُ قَدِيرٌ, and God is capable of bringing them together whenever He so decides. Now, the words used are not if He so decides, because the translation of if in Arabic is in. In yasha'u means if He so decided, which is a condition which may not be fulfilled. But when you say when He so decides, it becomes a promise. It's only a matter of choice of time. But He would certainly one day decide that the two forms of life existing on earth and in the heavens should be brought together. So this is a verse which is far ahead of our time. So far the scientists are only considering the possibility of existence of life in other planets mathematically. So far they have not received an iota of evidence which could lead them to the scientific observation that there does exist life elsewhere. But more and more scientists are now turning to the belief that there is a probability of life elsewhere only mathematically. But the Holy Quran 1400 years ago spoke of a universe where it was not just a plastic heaven covering shell after shell the earth and moving around it. It clearly indicates a sort of heaven with such bodies as would be able to sustain life and also develop life, of course. So it is far beyond our present time. Now the question only remains meant by when Allah so decides He'll be able to bring them together. Jama is not really a physical getting together, because sometimes through communication you come to meet others and have communication between two different bodies who are physically apart. Sometimes in status you can be brought together. So the word Jama is applicable to all. For instance, the people of the latter days, according to the Quran, will be made Jama with the people of the first days, that is first period, that is Hazrat Muhammad Sallallahu time. While the difference between us is 1400 years or thereabout, but because we will have communion with them in character, in style, in life, messages, purpose of life, etc. So according to the Holy Quran, we will be brought together. So this is the one moot point which only time will decide in what way Allah would bring them together. Sometimes scientists believe that within the known universe, which is close enough for us to reach them or for them to reach us within a lifetime, there were no signs of life. A statement which may be made by scientists because the scientific data available to them on which they are basing this claim is very meager, and nothing can be said with certainty. But if not, then there is of course the possibility of intercommunication, and many scientists are already working on this. And in America itself, there is a group of scientists who is now funded by some agencies to work on a communication system by which they could correspond with the aliens, they call them, or to receive signals from the aliens and to be able to interpret them. So that is all I had to say to your question. Thank you.
Jazakallah.
You have a question too? Come on. After.
Just my brother's question, just want to follow up.
Is he your brother or
No, my Muslim brother.
Just like your Muslim brother,
Yeah.
right? Yes.
Okay, Hazur, the question is that since we've been blessed with Quran Sharif on this planet, and we've been blessed with such a person as Hazrat Prophet Muhammad Mustafa Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, is it possible for the other people to be blessed with the same person and the same book?
This is a very big if indeed, because to share the same space and time does not require the same Sharia to be applicable to all. Now we are sharing this planet with hundreds of thousands of species of animal life. But because they differ, so the laws differ and the requirements differ. So because the animals I'm talking about are born in a period when the Sharia of Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had been perfected for all mankind, so it does not mean that these animals are also liable to follow that Sharia, because their requirements are different. So how do you know that these forms of life which we are speaking about will have human form, human understanding, human way of life? So everything is unknown commodity. So we can't answer this. Yes, we find that there is exactly the ditto copy of man produced elsewhere. But then again the question will begin, was he waiting till the time that suddenly he will come into contact with earth and find the message of the Quran? What was God doing with them until that time? Were they not provided their own Sharia? If they were, what would be the fight about? We will tell them you follow our Sharia and they will tell us you follow our Sharia. It's all just conjectures and they don't mean anything. I'm quite sure if life has developed enough in other planets to be able to be in communion with God, then they would have had their message already with them. Thank you.
Jazakumullah.
Yes, please. Yes, after you. Just a minute.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
My question is this, that
And my question is, where are you from? Ghana?
yes sir,
Okay. Well, from Shanta region?
yes sir.
Good. Come on.
Allah says in the Holy Quran, do not accept any religion apart from Islam.
Yes.
Also saying that the Jews and the Christians, whatever good deed they do, they will have their reward with Allah. May I know the...
But you have not read all the conditions mentioned in the second part of your question. The Holy Quran never says that Jews and Christians who do good will go to heaven. The Holy Quran says that whoever believes in God, whether he is a Jew or a Christian or belonging to any other book, and also believes in the hereafter, the day of judgment, and fully understands his responsibility, that he will be held answerable, then he does good deeds according to whatever he understands good to be. He has no fear, because Allah will not treat him beyond his capacity. This is a very logical declaration, and you can't change it. It's impossible. If you change the statement, then you'll have to believe that God is illogical. So this applies to all such situations where anyone belonging to Judaism or Christianity has not heard about Islam, or the message of Islam is not delivered properly enough to him for him to understand. This implies this, because whoever believes in God, it would be impossible for him to reject a prophet of God when he receives the message. So people don't understand this part. It is only applicable to such situations where people are incapable of deciding in favor of Islam, so naturally Allah would treat them according to their own capacity. Right?
Yes, sir. Is that correct?
Yes, please. Now, who wanted you? Please come first. You see, the normal practice is that in front of a microphone, we create a small alley where those who want to ask questions come and sit in an orderly way. And whenever their turn comes, they get up and ask the question. So you better do the same here. You go and make a line behind this gentleman who is going to ask a question, and whenever your turn comes, you don't have to raise your hand, come forward and ask the question. Yes, please. Yes, Assalamualaikum.
My question is two questions. One is, I hope is going to be a small answer because it's regarding the aliens. Isn't it in Quran, it has been mentioned already that we are the Ashraful Makhlukats already, so we know where we stand in relation to other creations in the universe.
Where is it said that we are Ashraful Makhlukat?
Okay, I understood of that.
Okay.
No, it was my question. Is it
Where is my question?
I don't know. Okay.
You don't know. So when you don't know whether it is said in the Quran or not, you shouldn't refer it to the Quran.
Okay.
Second question, please.
Second question is regarding we are living in United States and they have a lot of...
You see, one thing I must tell you, that the Holy Quran uses fazzalnakum and fazzalahum, etc., etc., an expression which is related to certain contexts and situations. For instance, it says, we gave preference to the Jews, to the Israelites, over the rest of the world, over all the worlds, over Alameen. It doesn't mean they are better people than the Muslims who are to follow them. So these are relative terms.
Okay.
Right.
The second question is regarding the practices which were already existing in United States, which are like Halloween parties and also the Thanksgiving days, which a lot of people who are now...
You see, there are many parts to the ceremony of Halloween. Number one, there is the activity of the boys knocking at the door, scaring people. If they did not give them something, of chocolates or things, they would do something, some mischief. Obviously, anyone can understand this is against Islamic teaching. So that part of Halloween is absolutely forbidden. As far as the fancy dress is concerned, wearing a mask, etc., there is no harm. Children, of course, play, and many a time we in Qadian used to have fancy dress parties just for the sake of fun. Islam does not require you to be completely bored to death. Healthy activities where there is no violation with the Islamic principles are carried out and there is no harm. So that part can be also played by the Muslims, but to a moderation and degree. We don't do that because we have other better employments for our money, and we shouldn't waste money in these small things. Next question, please.
Next was that if there is like other practices, people who have been like married into Muslim and become Muslims, and they have families who are non-Muslims and they still practice things like Christmas and Thanksgiving. What
is Thanksgiving?
It's a very good gesture, which was Thanksgiving to the God for the food. It was the Native Americans who came from outside give thanks to God for
destroying the Red Indians.
That's not what I was
saying. So what sort of Thanksgiving? This is why I'm asking you.
It's true.
Without going into the nature of things, you shouldn't decide hurriedly, because their Thanksgiving is the day of laments for the local population who belong to this area, who inherited this land indeed, much before these people came from abroad. So we will not participate in any celebration of cruelties, right?
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Assalamualaikum. I have two questions.
Yes, please.
The first one is like when the first two people came up to ask questions about aliens.
In front of the microphone. You know the aliens?
The first two people that came up to ask questions about the aliens from life from other planets.
No.
I wanted to ask the
This is
question.
wrong. No aliens came to Earth to initiate life on Earth.
No, you said that one day we will communicate with each other, and
I didn't say that aliens will appear on Earth.
I know, but you said if we will communicate.
Of course.
Yeah.
Communication has many possibilities. Why didn't you conceive the possibilities of you suddenly appearing on a foreign land, foreign star, and appear like an alien to them? That also is possible, isn't it?
Yeah, I want to ask a question that, like, if we communicate with them and they believe in religion and God,
Yes?
will they eventually one day become part of Islam too?
No?
They don't have to?
Because, not necessarily,
Okay.
because I already discussed this matter thoroughly. If they are capable of communicating with God, then God must have sent them a message of their own. So, unless God had decided them to join Islam and had left prophecies with them, that a time would come when you will come into communication with different people elsewhere whose religion would be better than yours, and you follow that. Unless such a thing exists, there is no question of their following Islam, and again, they are made of different materials. Maybe they are just silicone things, or of some metal, and they don't have such flesh as we have. So when the constitutions change, then the religious teachings also changes accordingly, right?
My second question is that,
Second or fourth?
second, like many people I see, like they smoke, including these.
Yes.
I want to know if it is lawful for Ahmadis to smoke, and
See, smoking is something which goes into the category of haram, because it doesn't fall into the category of intoxication which is made haram in the Holy Quran. That is why Hazrat Masih Maud, when he was inquired, in fact it was suggested to him that he should declare smoking haram because it's a bad thing. He said, who am I to do it when it is not done by Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah and the Holy Quran? So if Hazrat Masih Maud didn't do it, who am I to do that? You understand?
yeah,
But there are certain things which are bad, which you should understand to be bad. You don't have to be told that you may catch cold, you may not catch cold because it is bad. You try to run away from catching cold. So this is one of those things. It has some harmful effects, and all poisons are not declared haram, yet you do not eat them, do you?
No.
So, there are many filthy things which are not declared haram. Now if you ask me, is human perspiration declared haram? Why not? It's a bad thing. Sometimes it smells badly. And you say, no, it's not declared haram. Will you start licking your own perspiration because it's not haram?
No.
Understand these things. There are many areas. One area is that of haram, the other is that of halal. In between lies the land of no man. And there are so many things where tastes differ, requirements differ, and people can take their own small individual decisions. Right?
I asked this because I thought for some things there had to be circumstances in which you could do it.
Do what?
Like smoke.
Huh?
Smoke.
Huh?
Smoking.
I've already answered you, haven't I?
I know, but okay, thank you.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
So this the outbreak of plague, which is being called taun, is that really taun the way they are calling it in India?
That is found, there is no doubt about it.
And the second, that the Hazrat Masih's sayings on that anyone who is in my community or in my house, he'll be saved.
Yes.
Does that still apply on that thing? On that?
I hope so, strongly hope so, because as Mr. Sato-Islam has mentioned that this town will come again as a sign. So if it comes again as a sign, then of course it should behave exactly as it behaved in the earlier part. And those who are genuine true Ahmadis, they will be saved. Like they were all saved at the time of Hazrat Masih alayhi salatu wasalam. You know, even he went to claim that not even a rat will die of town in my house. And this is exactly what happened while all around people were dying, rats were dying of town, and it did not happen in his house. So this is a most wonderful proof of his truth, which shone like heavenly bodies do. That is why people during the period of town began to become Ahmadis much faster, in much greater number than ever before. Some people ask me, what is the proof that this prophecy was fulfilled? And it was not the other way around. I say you study the progress of Ahmadiyyat with reference to the papers of that time, as I have done already. You were surprised to see what a big influx there was immediately after town of those who started joining Ahmadiyyat in hundreds of thousands. Now, if Ahmadis were dying equally in number, and perhaps they should have been punished more if they were liars, then what happened to the world? Why were they becoming Ahmadis? And even if after becoming Ahmadis they were still dying, then why did not they return back to their original faiths? So that influx into Ahmadiyyat became stable. Now, in capacity of Waqf Jadid member, or in the capacity of Khudam al-Ahmadiyya member, I used to travel a lot in the villages. And perhaps I think I have traveled more in Pakistan in villages than anybody else. But during my inquiries, I found that actually in large number there were still towns who were witness to the fact that our forefathers saw this sign and became Ahmadis. Yet not one case to the opposite was discovered by me. Not a single village declared to me that that village used to be an Ahmadi, but because town also destroyed them equally, so they renegated and went back to their original faith. So this is a very positive proof that the prophecy which was fulfilled to the letter, and if, as I understand, it is a sign of God which is appearing again, then of course I hope, inshallah, no genuine true Ahmadi would be affected adversely by the town.
Jazakumullah for that. Continuation of this 100 years in the past in the Jamaat Ahmadiyya, the town has appeared a few times. It is going to be reappearing?
No, not a few times. Town appeared only between 1894 and 1906.
Yeah.
And after that there was no town. Now, you are dragging me into answering more than I wanted to do here. Already I have instructed Muslim Television Ahmadiyya to present many articles and discussions on this issue for the rest of the world to know exactly what happened in the past and what may happen again. You know, long ago, in 1976, Maulvi Abul Atta Sahib, late Maulana Abul Atta Sahib, who was the proprietor and editor of Al-Furqan, once came to me in Waqf-e-Jadid and wanted me to work on a problem which he thought needed more attention, and so far we have not been able to tackle it effectively. The problem he presented to me was the natural calamities and their relationship with prophecies of God. Can they be used as punishment, like Masih Maud has said? And if so, then anyone can say these calamities are befalling the world according to my predictions, and they are proving that I am right. Earthquakes do take place, so also plague strikes large areas of human population from time to time. So how can you tell the difference between a prophecy of warning being fulfilled or a natural calamity taking its course naturally? This was the question he gave me to work upon, and I wrote a series of articles published during that year in Al-Furqan regarding, I think, 2 or 3, if not a full series, and which can be read now by you. Their town was also taken up. And during my study of town, I realized that if Hazrat Masih Maud was an advent of the Messiah, as we believe he was, then maybe there was a similarity between the signs which appeared for him and the signs which appeared for Jesus Christ. So it is possible that during the early period of Christianity, Ta'un also came to punish the people. And if we study the behavior of that Ta'un of the first period, then perhaps we'll be able to understand the nature and the behavior of the Ta'un, that is the plague of the second period. So I was indeed astounded to discover that Ta'un was utilized by God as an instrument of punishment to the people of Judea when they rejected Christianity and perpetrated crimes against innocent Christians. Now that sound was limited to the area of Judea alone, spilled across borders but not much. But then surprisingly, exactly after 100 years, the plague again broke out, but in a much wider area, and it followed where Christianity had also reached and was again rejected, and Christians were cruelly treated. I am talking of the Roman Empire. So it was a large plague and very devastating plague which struck the Roman Empire after about 100 years from the appearance of the first plague. Now, having discovered this, I wrote in that article that I believe that this plague of Hazrat Masih Maud is going to reappear again after 100 years, and it will strike a wider area this time than before. Now then I worked on Masih Maud literature, more bringing it to focus, the town issue in focus, further focus, and I was surprised to read a prophecy in Hazrat Muslim's books that God had told him that this town would come again. It has not left forever. It would come again and deliver the same message. Now that does not mention in how many years, but inferring from what had happened earlier in the history, I had predicted that it would occur after 100 years. Now I was surprised to learn that at the time of Masih Maud The first town which struck was in exactly 1894. It appeared from Surat and spread to a degree to some extent in Bombay, and then it was controlled for a while. Then it struck again in 1897, and from then on it became uncontrollable. And then it started slowly traveling northwards and eastwards and westwards, and entered the Punjab some years after the prediction of Hazrat Masih Maud Salam. And there it became the severest, where the message of Ahmadiyya had been delivered and rejected. So far, that prophecy seems to be bearing well. And I believe, this is my personal belief, because God has not specifically told me, but the study of history of Christianity and the books of Masih Maud Islam has at least convinced me that as it has started unrolling itself again, the town will further proceed in the same direction and apply this time in a wider area. And play havoc in a wider area. Now that is one type of town. Hazrat Masih Maud Islam has written also that God had told me, he said, God has told me that another type of plague will also appear. And that type of plague will appear more in the Christian countries and will originate from Christian countries. Now when I found out many years after my arrival in England that the doctors were referring to AIDS as a type of plague, then my mind was automatically carried to that declaration was Masih Maud Islam, that God had told him that a new type of plague would appear, and particularly in the Christian areas. Now I further investigated, but the only problem was that according to the scientists who had worked on the introduction of this new type of plague, they also refer to it as plague everywhere, but a type of plague, exactly the words used by Masih Maud Islam, that this new type of plague started not in Europe but in Uganda. So I was a bit intrigued as to how Masih Maud Islam could be wrong. He said it will originate from Christian area. He didn't use the word Europe. He said from Christian area. And if he also used the word Europe, I'm not sure, but this particular place speaks of the origin of this new type to have taken root in a Christian area. So when I visited Uganda, I went to visit a small hospital which was built by the Ahmadiyya community in an area which is almost entirely Christian. And when I was going there, I was told that this area is called Slim. I said, what do you mean by Slim? He said, because this is where AIDS appeared for the first time. And that is where it has played such havoc that according to estimations, a large number of population will be wiped out within next decade. And very few people will be left alive because AIDS has already worked itself into the bloodstreams of the people living there. So then I was reassured, of course, that when Masih Maud Islam used the words in a Christian area, whether it was Africa or wherever it was, it did spring from an area which was Christian, predominantly Christian. And now the last part of the research which you have forced me to share with you now. That is my inquisitiveness regarding Rasulullah's prophecies. I thought if this is really designed by God, it's not possible that Rasulullah would be left uninformed. So some ulama helped me in finding that hadith, which exactly applies to the situation of the AIDS. And there, Ahmad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has also used the word ta'un. Rasulullah once spoke of a people who become shameless. He said, when a people become shameless, so that they begin to display sex openly, then God punishes them with a sort of plague. And it appears with hard swellings in the neck. And then he described it somehow, I don't remember. But this was strangely applicable only to the modern way of life, where permissiveness is so widespread, it has become a plague in itself. That on television and videos and this and that, you can watch the worst type of naked display that one can imagine. You know, man has beaten beasts hollow in shamelessness, and this prophecy of Rasulullah applies verbatim to this situation. Now, you study the history of mankind and its crimes and sins, never will you come across an age where publicly sex was displayed. Never. Never in the time of Rasulullah anywhere was done. Nor in the time of the Roman Empire or anywhere else. So when Rasulullah said this, it had to be a prophecy, because it had never happened before in the history of mankind. And there he also uses the word, God will punish them with a sort of plague. And this is exactly what the AIDS is referred to. So what I'm visualizing is this, and this is what I told the Jamaat in Uganda, that they should warn every people now that this disease, AIDS, according to my estimation, is going to remain dormant for a while. But it will continue to infect people without their noticing that something is happening. Apparently healthy people will come into contact and this virus will be transferred from the diseased one, the carriers, to the innocently not knowing person, not innocent but person unaware of what's happening to him. And when it already reaches a large number of people, then due to some climatic changes or something, some air pollution or something, suddenly it may become an epidemic. So I thought, working with the same principle of 100 years, that if I am right in my guess, then perhaps this AIDS virus will become active and virile and become epidemic in around 97 to 2000, some years beyond. Now, this could only be possible if the virus could stay in the body as dormant without being activated for a larger number of years. Now, my study of AIDS, because then I started investigating into the behavior of AIDS more closely, revealed to me that AIDS can stay dormant for 8 years. And suddenly after 7.5 years, it may become activated. So which means that the time as I worked out exactly tallied with my guess that it would become activated around 2000 years, just before 2000 years. So these are the things we are talking about today, okay?
Jazakumullah. Assalamu alaikum.
Yes, please.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
I would like to know in the so-called third world countries.
Come a bit closer. And where are you from?
I'm from Ghana.
Again, huh?
Yeah.
Right. Kamasi?
Yeah, Shanta region.
Yes, the Shanta region, right.
The Hudamal of Media in the third world countries, especially in my country, Ghana, if we have ijtima or meetings gathering together, we have a special attire, which is white and black. I would like to know if it is an international dressing for the Hudamal of Media, or it's just specifically created by Ghanaians or third world countries.
You see, the dress you are referring to is like a muffler or a piece of cloth, square piece of cloth, which is knotted in front. Is that what you're referring to?
The request there is every Hudamu have to have white shirt and a black pants.
You see, the flag of Hudamal Ahmadiyya is black and white.
Yeah.
Made of black and white stripes.
Yeah.
So, some people in Ghana might have got the idea to make a uniform in black and white so that it will be reminiscent of Hudamal Ahmadiyya. And people's mind would be led to Hudamal Ahmadiyya, and it will become symbolic in the manner of speaking. So there is no harm people doing such things. I've also seen people doing that, but nowadays it has changed a little bit into a more practical method of identifying Khudam with Khudam al-Ahmadiyya. And that is, they have made a sort of handkerchief, larger handkerchief in black and white.
Yeah.
And they put it behind their shoulders and knot it in front of them, so that Khuddam do not have to wear a full dress of black and white. They can wear that much, and that indicates that they belong to Khuddam al-Ahmadiyya. This is now much in vogue in Ghana, in Nigeria, and other African countries.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
My question is particularly related with Islamic economy. Excuse me. When we talk about Islamic economy, the thing which comes up in the mind is interest-free economy, particularly. I read about it a little bit in your book, and I just wanted to know that, let's take a hypothetical example of our community. They will start something without interest. How they will survive in a world where everybody is interest-oriented if they are not be able to convince others that economy should be interest-free? How would they survive?
You see, this question has already been answered by me, I think in the same
Yes,
book.
I read about it.
Yes.
And the thing which did not appear to me clearly is, how would we survive in such a giant economy?
Are you surviving today or not?
Well, right now I'm surviving with the assumption that I am paying interest and I'm earning interests.
How? Why?
Well, I do have some credit cards and I'm paying interest on that money which was borrowed.
And how much interest do you pay and why?
Well, I had borrowed money and I had to pay interest because that was one of the conditions.
I understand, but how do you get interest from them?
How did you get it? I mean, I borrowed money from them, that's why I have to pay interest.
You said I pay and also get interest.
Well, second part is, if you have a saving account, you deposit the money and then you earn money.
So you have already answered the question you have raised. Hazrat Masih Maud Islam, when inquired about such a situation, said that if necessary, like in an overwhelming economic system, which is beyond your control, you have sometimes to deal with financial transactions which involve interest. Hazrat Masih Maud Islam answered that keep a separate account of what you pay and what you receive. Honestly, whatever you receive, pay to the account from which you pay, and whatever is left as marginal is no fault of yours. That will be forgiven as a compulsion. You understand?
Yes, I do understand.
The point is, survival is very important. And survival of individual also is so important that the Holy Quran permits us to eat even flesh of pig to save our personal lives. So Hazrat Masih Mauud's edict regarding national survival is exactly in accordance with the spirit of the Holy Quran. But it does not give permission to everybody to freely indulge in transactions of interest. Again, it is suicidal for people to do that because it always is of disadvantage. In fact, you don't realize how much at disadvantage you are when you buy things with conditions that you will pay higher rates ultimately. I have many times worked it out in the form of some illustrations and proved mathematically that those people who indulge in borrowing from banks and buying things of utility are always at loss, and the nation as a whole also is at loss. Some of that I think has been worked out in the book you are referring to.
Yep.
But now I am turning to the personal situation where you are compelled to borrow a little while, and I am telling you that as far as that goes, that is considered a necessary evil in Islam, because you are a part of a system where national survival is important. But you should not indulge freely. You should try your best to avoid. Now, I have experimented with this on a bigger scale in the Jamaat's dealings. When I came to Europe, I discovered that freely Jamaat was buying property in different countries by borrowing large sums from the banks. I was absolutely, astounded and annoyed. I said, why are you doing this? They said, we have to build a mosque, we have to build this and that, and we don't have money enough to immediately do it. I said, then wait. That is why the Holy Quran tells us of patience. But I will not permit any Jamaat in the world to go for buying property or build mosques by money borrowed on the conditions of interest. It was stopped. At that time, if you compare the figures of the Jamaat property of that period and now, you will be absolutely surprised. The difference is, in some cases, 1 to 100. The Jamaat has become so rich since then, and Jamaat has got properties of the value of at least 100 times compared to the time I'm talking about. So it happened because of this blessing of interest-free transaction, and Allah somehow blesses you if you make a resolution that you will not borrow on interest. So a blessing, twofold blessing follows. One, mathematically it can be proved that interest borrowing is not good. And secondly, the blessing somehow falls on you, and you are helped by God in all your economic proposals. That is why I tell Ahmadis, as far as the houses are concerned, the situation there is slightly different, not slightly, considerably different. When you pay interest on the borrowed money for buying a house, it's not a simple case of an interest loan, because you are also provided the benefit of using that house without paying rent. So it is a misnomer for money you pay to call it interest. What actually you are paying is the rent you should have paid if you had rented a house. So that is why I permit Jamaat to have one house for their use, personal use, because in that case they will save money on the rentals they have to pay, and they think they are paying interest, but it's not interest. It is the use of house for which they have to pay. And actually what they have to pay is the amount for which the exact amount which is the price of the house. So sometimes it is more advantageous. For instance, in London I studied the cases of these individuals by asking them to consult me before going into a transaction and let me study the prospects. So a large number of Ahmadi youth and also some old people consulted me before they decided in favor of buying a house. Apart from this study, it also helped them because I understood the market position better than many. So I advised them not to buy that house and wait for that and so on. So with the grace of Allah, it was always advantageous for them. But as far as this issue is concerned, many among them are so happy now that previously, so suppose they had to pay £600 of rentals per month. Now they bought a property in which they are living, and they are also renting out a portion of it to others, earning the 600s from that income, and they are living freely. So this is not interest, this is a complicated affair where things are mixed up. So we have to study every case intelligently and in depth, and just not follow the misnomers or the common terminology used nowadays. Sometimes the thing is called a profit, while it is an interest. In the customer is being a profit. So we have to move cautiously and carefully and examine everything case by case. Right? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum, Hazur.
Assalamu alaikum.
My name is Sajid Khan. Khaksar is the president of Ahmadiyya Muslim Student Association.
MashaAllah, where?
New York.
Right.
On behalf of the association, I would humbly like to seek Hazur guidance on the role that an Ahmadi student must play on colleges and universities.
You see, already I have spoken so much on this. You write to the Ahmadiyya Intercollegiate Association, Pakistan, through, I think it should be Nazir Talim, and they can provide you with all my addresses to students, because I have a long history of my personal relationship with students' affairs, right from my old student days. I was an active member of Ahmadiyya Intercollegiate Association of Lahore in pre-partition days. Then after the partition, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Salis made me the president of the association, or patron of the association. So in this capacity, I related with the students very freely and very often, and gave them my advice from time to time. So instead of my repeating all that, you better write to the Nazir Talim, because I remember having created there a cell for the students in which all the observations were collected, which were made by any caliph before or after.
Thank you. Jazakumullah.
I would like to know, what is the Islamic viewpoint as far as genetic engineering is concerned?
I have again spoken on this subject. I think America is cut off from the rest of the world. It has to be rediscovered by Ahmadi Columbuses. How you can live in an island, isolated island, I can't understand. On genetic engineering, the most important thing to be remembered is that the only one invention against which Allah warns you is some employment of genetic engineering. Because although there are so many predictions about the future inventions of man and discoveries, none has been declared by God as satanic. None of them, except this, where Allah warns you that Satan will incite people to give incisions in the ears of the animals and cattle, mainly cattle, and also it will incite people to change the creation of the world, of God. And that warning is given in such strong terms that nobody can miss the message that these people will be punished heavily by God. Now, why only genetic engineering, which deals with the change of the creation of Allah and not any other invention? Because I believe such people will be punished by their own invention, in fact. Genetic engineering is an area where man can lose control of its experimentation, and things may go completely out of hand of the scientists who are trying to change the nature of species by taking a small gene or a character from one species and adding it on to the genes of another species, hoping that that additional gene would create exactly the estimated change. That is a very far cry from reality. What is happening is not what the scientists think would happen. Already there are cases registered in this very country where they transferred a character from a gene of one animal to another animal, but it behaved completely in a different way than they had expected scientifically. So that is what I mean, how the punishment may take the form of Allah's wrath, because if the thing mishaps occur in a wider area, man may, unknowingly, inadvertently invent its own worst enemy in the form of some insects or some species of life which will attack man, and man will not be able to control, defend itself against it. So all these dangers are open. But genetic engineering is not always used to change the creation of Allah. It is also used to preserve the creation of Allah by removing the defects in the genes and characters, by transferring some healthy characters from other genes to a diseased gene, with the result that health is restored. So that practice cannot be referred to as change of the creation of Allah. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. That effort is in favor of preserving the character of what Allah has created. So as such, it cannot be condemned. So that is why I always tell, no need of this, please. It will only create noise. Huh? That is why I tell Ahmadi students, research scholars, to only participate in that healthy pursuit, and should not at all involve in changing the character of species. Okay? Thank you. Are you contemplating to become an engineer?
Yes.
Have you received enough warning?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, please. And somebody should also tell me when there is time for prayer. Okay?
Assalamu alaikum. So my question is about Baba Guru Nanak. I would like to know whether or not he holds any position in Islam, and if he intended to preach Islam.
Again, the news has not reached America. A strange thing indeed, isn't it? Our Masih Islam has written so much on Guru Baba Nanak and his robe that he wore and the Holy Quran which was inscribed on it, etc., etc. And yet people here don't seem to have received that news at all. What can we do about it? Tell me. Why don't you read one of Mr. Sadhu's books on this subject, which is entitled Sat Bachan? Can you read Urdu?
Not any advanced Urdu.
What?
Not any advanced Urdu, just simple, basic. Like,
But I think it's less than basic.
I guess.
This is what I found here. This reminds us that we must pay more attention to the most essential task of teaching good Urdu to all those who hail from Urdu base, from countries where Urdu is spoken. And those who have English base, if they can also learn Urdu like the people of Urdu speaking countries are learning English, then this exchange would be very advantageous to Ahmadiyyat, because then they could be able to read Mr. Sadhu's books directly, and you will be able to translate them with greater authority. So you better start doing it seriously. I told German young girls during my conference session with them to do it, and I was happily surprised. Within 2 months, I started receiving letters written in Urdu by those girls who had no knowledge of ABC of Urdu. But because they had a will to follow and they had enthusiasm to practice what I required of them, so with the grace of Allah, they started reading and writing, and also very excellently, effectively translating my addresses simultaneously. This new generation of Ahmadi girls, and now also some Ahmadi boys, but larger number, more girls are involved in this than boys at present, is a treat to watch. They can understand Urdu so well, English so well, German of course, they speak like their own language, and they can work as translators very fluently and better than the previous generation people do. So this I would require you to do, please. The Ahmadi youth here must be taught Urdu very seriously by their own parents in their respective houses. And if they don't know Urdu, then some arrangement should be made by Khulam al-Anbiya or other organizations like Lajna Ma'alla. And as far as MTA goes, I have already started teaching Urdu to all those who do not know Urdu, directly myself. 11 lessons have already been delivered through MTA, and more will follow when I reach home. And inshallah, I propose to teach Urdu to all people in the world, whichever language they speak, directly without the help of any other language, within a matter of a year or two. And then also, inshallah, we'll have a break in between, and when they know enough Urdu, verbal Urdu, then they will be taught how to read and write, so that by 2 years' time, they can start educating themselves. Because a language can be taught within 2 years to a degree that it becomes an instrument in your hand to further improve your knowledge of that language. But learning a language is a much longer process than 2 years. So my plan is to teach them enough Urdu, verbal Urdu as well as written Urdu, so that within 2 years they are capable of reading ordinary books, and with the help of dictionaries and friends, they advance their knowledge further and become so familiar with the idiom of that language that it comes to them like their own mother tongue. So I advise young Ahmadi boys and girls who are born in America, who are unfortunate in not knowing Urdu, which was their parental language, to start learning it once again, so that we resolve the problem of communication with the rest of the world. Right?
Yes.
Thank you.
I've heard that in heaven there are different levels.
Pardon?
I've heard in heaven there are different levels.
Is that true?
Of course it is true.
Could you comment on that? I mean,
You see, everyone has a different level here, hasn't he?
yeah.
You have a different level than others around. While you appear to be the same human beings, your tastes differ, your appreciation of things differ, your ability to enjoy things differ so much that something is so tasteful and delicious to somebody's taste, while others are horrified with the very thought of consuming such a thing. Will that not happen?
Yeah.
So already you have answered your own question. If here people are of different tastes and different levels, how could they be amalgamated into one single level in the heaven? They have their own respective heavens. Okay?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Assalamu alaikum, Hazur.
Wa rahmatullah.
I was listening to you, I had listened to your khutbahs on the Gulf crisis, and I now have a new, I guess, skeptical look at former President George Bush, and especially now at the acts that our president is performing in Haiti and other countries as well as Bosnia. And I was wondering, now that I'm suspicious of their actions, is it right for me to also be suspicious of the actions taken by the forefathers of this nation, like George Washington and Abraham Lincoln, who the nation itself, they revered them?
You should not permit yourself to overgeneralize things. It's much wiser to judge things on merit. And things about which you have no basic knowledge should better be left unjudged than for you to judge them rashly and draw wrong conclusions. As far as my study of Abraham Lincoln is concerned, I can't say that of George Washington, but of Abraham Lincoln, I can say with a measure of certainty that he was basically a good, sound human being. And it was that which directed his policies, and he was also very firm in his resolution and very consistent in his actions. So that is why he can be rightly called as the true builder of America, and I would always respect him as such. So just because Bush is behaving like an animal of the bush, you can't say that every president before him must have acted like him. Right?
Yes, Jazakallah.
Sam?
Sam?
We have a question about Iraq and Kuwait.
About what?
Iraq and Kuwait. Hey, what is your point of view about
I
Iraq?
still don't understand this. Iraq and Kuwait. Huh? Iraq also. You see, you ate up the word E and you said rocket quake. So I thought you were saying something like rock and roll, that sort of thing. Iraq and Kuwait. Okay, thank you.
What is your point of view about Iraq invading Kuwait and selling the oil to foreign land?
You see, already I have spoken on this subject at some length, and it is exactly this which is referred to by the earlier questioner. If you can read English, I hope you can, when you read the English translation of my sermons on the issue of Gulf War and its results and possible effects on future. Right? Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
My question is, if somebody puts their hand on the Quran and says that something is true but it's really a lie, is it true that they will die within a 23-year period?
No. It is true that he may die instantaneously a spiritual death. But as far as physical death goes, you can't say that he must die within 23 years. Okay. Next. You see, if that had happened, then all Pakistan would have been finished by now.
Assalamu alaikum, Huzur.
Wow, Assalamu alaikum.
I want to ask a question about deja vu and what you have to say about that, because
About
sometimes
what?
deja vu, when you experience something that you think has happened before,
What do you refer to as deja vu?
deja vu, yes,
Deja vu.
deja vu,
Deja vu.
yeah.
It's a French word, but what it means? What does it mean?
Well, in America it's referred to as when you experience something, like an event,
No, but I'm asking you the translation of the word deja vu.
I don't know.
Does it know? You don't know? Yes, you know?
It means already seen. Already seen.
But tell me which word stands for already and what proceed?
Deja is already.
Deja.
Yeah.
Right.
And vu is.
Vu, that's all. But it's a vu, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not vu,
No, vu.
it's vu. Because you shape your lips in the form of pronouncing U, but pronounce E instead. U. That is the French U, right? I can't do it perfectly, but better than you. So it's deja vu. What is it? Yes, what about it?
Well, I wanted to know what Islam says on it, and like, is it true, or like,
You see, this question was addressed to me in Washington, and I answered it, and I think previously also somewhere in America. This is related to the deep imprint on our memories of some past experiences of this life, not of the life before. And there are many things which are embedded deeper as we move across time, and it goes deeper into a subconscious part of the brain. So we don't know what we already possess as knowledge. Now something happens which somehow excites the hidden information, and it can't come up clearly and specifically, but a shadow of it surfaces. And we have a vague feeling that we have seen something like this, we have experienced something like it. And if you concentrate enough on such events introspectively, then many times you discover why you had a feeling. In an old childhood experience, you went to some hill station and that special moment was imprinted on your mind, but you didn't remember exactly the surrounding of everything. One other day, later in life, you go to similar things and you have a feeling that something of this nature had happened. And if you concentrate enough, sometimes you recall that event. But if you don't, then that is called deja vu. You see? Thank you. Next. Are we prepared now or not yet? About prepared? About or they are?
Yes, sir, they are. Just a few at once.
Okay. Yes.
Is it dinosaurs were back in the Stone Age? Is it true that they will come back
Stone Age, much before that.
much before that?
That's right, yes.
And will they come back to life? Like Allah?
From the dead?
No, I mean, will Allah make more of them? Like,
I don't see any possibility of
make
that.
them more improved?
I do not see any possibility of that because the human beings are acquiring characters which are quite similar to dinosaurs. So it's quite enough to have such living dinosaurs among us.
But like in the day of judgment?
Which dinosaurs? The human dinosaurs?
No, I mean,
The other ones? No, they will not be resurrected because they have no law to follow. No Sharia was revealed from them. They are just a step during the preparation of man, ultimate appearance of man. So they are like ladders, used by God, so that the height which we call the position the man holds today among the living species or dead species is reached ultimately. So when it is reached, then these steps become necessary only to the degree that they are essential for the support of life. If they are not essential for the support of life, then they are wiped out, because sometimes then they play a negative role against the survival of life, human life. You see, all those animals which play an important role in the ecosystem are made to survive by Allah. We don't know what role they are playing, but the scientists are now discovering many roles which were previously undiscovered, and their discovery of such roles assures us that everything which exists has a role to play in keeping the ecosystem perfectly well. And that ecosystem as a whole is essential for human survival. You understand? But dinosaurs and many species which have become extinct now, if they were permitted to continue, they would disturb this ecosystem so strongly against the existence of man that there will be less chances of survival of man. So that is why I say the unnecessary things which already have been wiped out by nature will not come back. But in storybooks, yes, of course. Okay?
Okay.
You want to see the tamasha of dinosaurs, very much. You can see in some television film or something where they play with fantasies, not with realities. Okay?
Exactly.
All right.